Hi everyone, this is Cabane the Christian. I was asked to do a video response to this video entitled Who Wrote the Gospels by the Atheist Experience. In this video, the host of this show, or one of them, just casually spews out a bunch of unrefuted stale canards against the authorship of Matthew, as written by Matthew, so I'm just going to do a point-by-point response to this. The real content about this starts about 2 minutes 50 seconds in, and I'll just be going off from my notes here. The first thing he says is that Matthew was anonymous. Okay, sure, Matthew is internally anonymous, but this really means nothing as to the ascription of the Gospel to the Apostle Matthew, because Tacitus's annals were also anonymous, and the first ascription to Tacitus comes from Tertullian. And relative to the writing of Tacitus, we actually have an earlier ascription to Matthew relative to the writing of Matthew than we do to Tacitus relative to the writing of Tacitus's annals. So this is really an irrelevant point. He says that, well, Matthew was ascribed to Matthew by the church, and yes, this is true, universally, I may note. But then he says, well, there are good reasons to deny the authorship of Matthew as being written by Matthew, and he cites specifically the dependence on Mark. And I don't really think the commentary he read, whatever that was, gave a good explanation for that, because it's a perfectly reasonable explanation. The explanation is, Mark was not written by Mark based on Mark's own personal investigation. Papias, writing in about 125 Common Era, notes that Mark was written by Mark based on the testimony of the Apostle Peter. Now, not that Matthew is a relatively obscure apostle, there's nothing special about him, but Peter was one of the inner circle, the rock upon which the church was founded. And so Peter would have better access to information about Jesus than Matthew would, and thus Matthew could have used Mark as a source, but he would really be using Peter as a source. And this is a perfectly reasonable explanation. Now, here I found this interesting because he says, if a work is decades from the events, and it's anonymous, then it is thus on a very shaky ground, to quote him. But he's not going to apply the standard to any secular history. As I've already noted, Tacitus was written anonymously. Technically, the annals were written anonymously, and they were written decades from the events. However, historians consider Tacitus to be one of the best ancient historians we have. He's not on shaky ground by any means. You're only going to apply the standard to the Bible. You'll never apply it to secular history. It's a typical case of special pleading. Now, he also said that there is no evidence there was a Jesus outside the Bible by contemporaries. Now this is interesting because he has two qualifiers here that I think are totally ridiculous. First, outside the Bible. Why does there need to be an account outside the Bible? Any really good quality accounts of Jesus were so important that they were put in the Bible. Being canonized does not make a document unreliable. An appeal to bias is little more than a veiled appeal to motives, which I may note as a fallacy. Now, the second qualifier he used was by contemporaries, and this is a stale, refuted, old soundbite, and it is just getting ridiculous to hear this over and over again. Let me say it here. Contemporary evidence is not required. It's never been required. It's not required for any historical figure. Hillel, Shammai, Hori, etc. Okay, we do not need contemporary evidence to establish the existence of a figure or the historicity of an event. He says there are more questions than answers with regard to the authorship of Matthew, and this is absolutely false. All the skeptical objections to the authorship and date of Matthew have been refuted over and over again, and yet, searching the scholarly literature, one will find that skeptical scholars really have not answered the positive case for the authorship of Matthew, nor have they answered the refutations of their own objections. They continue to recycle their own stale, refuted objections, and you parrot those objections, but they've been refuted before, and here I am refuting them again. There are far more answers to this than there are questions. Now, he says churches aren't acknowledging these issues, and yes, I agree, churches aren't acknowledging these issues, and this is a more problem with the church than it is with Matthew. The church has become an intellectual cesspool, particularly in the United States, and that needs to change. So this is a problem with the church. Now, he says a little earlier, and I should have addressed this earlier, but I'm going back here. He says, well, where's the account of the birth of Jesus outside the Bible? Who would care about the birth of Jesus outside the Bible unless they believed Jesus was divine? Now, we do find the church fathers referring to Jesus as being born of virgins, and these are outside the Bible. But you mean by non-Christians? Well, non-Christians wouldn't believe the virgin birth story anyway, so why would they report that? This is a ridiculous standard. And you say, where's the account outside the Bible of the crucifixion? Sure, Lucian, Josephus, Tacitus, etc. We've got plenty of accounts outside the Bible of the crucifixion of Jesus. A. Harvey refers to the crucifixion as one of the best attested events of ancient history. Yes, where's the account of the healings, the miracles of Jesus from outside the Bible by non-Christians? Sure, Celsus, Porphyry. We've got enemy attestation of the miracles of Jesus. Admittedly, some of it is late, some of it is relatively early, like Celsus from the mid-2nd century, and Josephus in particular, in an authentic portion of the Testimonium does refer to the miracles of Jesus. It is very consistent with the vocabulary of Josephus, so we may consider it authentic. And so he refers to it in 90 Common Era. Celsus in the mid-2nd century refers to the miracles of Jesus. Porphyry a little later. Julian the Apostate much later. But the point is that there was really no denial, even from skeptics of that time, that Jesus did miracles. So there are the accounts right there. Also note particularly that we have one independent tradition from the Sibylline Oracles. Now, the issue here from the Sibylline Oracles is not so much the date, but the fact that the tradition is independent. And this is an independent tradition of a specific miracle, and that is the feeding of the 5,000. And may note that this coheres with what we would expect. The independent tradition is found from the most prominent miracle, while the traditions that aren't independent, where one tradition or multiple ones from the different apostles are the ones from more the minor miracles that happen to one person or a few people. So this coheres exactly with what we would expect, an independent tradition for the feeding of the 5,000. Okay, as for where's an extra biblical account of the walking on water, there is one reference to it in some apocryphal work of the 2nd century. It says, first of Jesus of walking on the waves. It's probably dependent on the Gospels, but point is that there is an account outside of the Bible, so technically his claim there is wrong. That doesn't really mean much. We don't really need an account outside the Bible. Alright, where's the account of Herod slaughtering the infants? Now, Herod did this kind of stuff all the time. There's really no reason for any historian outside the Bible to refer to this event. There are probably 3 to 4 infants in Bethlehem, and this is really not a big deal for Herod, who killed tons and tons of people. No reason. There's nothing special about this event. The only reason we consider it special is because it's associated with the birth of Jesus, and none of the secular historians consider Jesus too important. He was a marginal Jew, as Meyer puts it. So that's not really important. Now, yes, where's the extra biblical accounts of the zombies from Matthew? Well, may I note that the historians of the day would not have believed this account simply because they were not Christians in the first place. But we do technically have an extra biblical account from the very early 2nd century, the beginning of the days and the dawn of the 2nd century. Quadratus, an early Christian apologist, says that in his day, that is, when he was alive, some of these resurrected saints were still alive. So he apparently had no problem referring to this account as fact. One thing he says later is that, well, there is no evidence for the reliability. You're free to take it on faith, but there's just no evidence for reliability. You're simply wrong. And this is an oversimplification of the issues that is frankly appalling. There are plenty of biblical scholars who would say that there is evidence for the reliability of the Gospels. Craig Blomberg, who's a credentialed scholar, and N.T. Wright, a highly respected scholar. Several scholars do say that there is good evidence for the reliability of the Gospels. For you to just dismiss it this way shows that you're just an amateur and a dabbler in history, and that you really haven't read that much at all. And you say, there's no rational justification whatsoever. Well, plenty of people would disagree with that. Plenty of credentialed scholars would disagree with that. And Jeffrey J. Lauder, one of the co-authors of The Empty Tomb, would disagree with that statement. He said that it's rational to deny or accept the resurrection of Christ. So please do not give me this nonsense that it's just obvious that there's no evidence here. It's obvious there's no rational justification. There is real debate in the scholarly community here, and for you to dismiss it shows that you really don't know anything you're talking about. And I also want to address your implication that faith is somehow belief without evidence or in spite of evidence or whatever that is. That is not the biblical definition of faith. Now, the word translated faith in the New Testament is the Greek pistis, and pistis is a Greek term for belief based on previous experience or evidence, in other words. So, and Paul himself said that we must test everything and hold on to the good in 1 Thessalonians 5:21. In Acts 17, the word for they translate the word pistis as assurance, and that we have assurance that he is that we will rise from the dead because he raised from the dead. In other words, evidence. So you misapply the word faith based on maybe a little English dictionary you look at that. Frankly, English dictionaries are irrelevant when you're looking for the meanings of Greek words. So this is a bit longer than I had thought it would be, but someone asked me to respond to this video, who wrote the Gospels by the Atheist Experience. I hope I've shown you how they are amateurs, mere dabblers in history, really don't know what they're talking about. And skateboard atheists. Thank you. Goodbye.